Hi, I'm Julie Cooper, a thriller writer and half of the duo bringing you this regular podcast series, Kendall and Cooper Talk Mysteries. Before I turn it over to Wendy, I'd like to say thanks to my brother Chris Squires for his original composition and performance of our theme music, The Man in the Panama Hat. And now, here's Wendy.
Hello. I am cozy crazy and but still one thing I think that unites the diverse mystery fans and readers across the full spectrum of the genre is a strong desire for justice. It's something that we seek but don't always see in real life. In our mystery stories, we want the perpetrator hunted, found, and suffer consequences, especially when the crime is murder. And we look for justice on behalf of everyone, no matter who it was who was wronged. It's a demand for fairness and justice for all.
And speaking of things that unite us, a sense of community, of belonging, is also something that all of us seek. Whether we find it in our own small town or neighborhood, in a school, a writers group, or by getting behind our favorite sports team, go Seahawks, most of us instinctively look for things that bring us together instead of pulling us apart. And that seems even more important right now. I know we'll be talking about small towns, close-knit communities, and the secrets they conceal with today's mystery author.
Our guest today is a bestseller with more than 20 books and 4 novellas. In her works, she creates inviting communities and certainly pursues justice for all. In her ghostly Southern Mystery series, her murdered characters cannot cross over until after their murderers have been found and brought to justice. Her other series are just as endearing. Killer Coffee. Although this is set in Kentucky, the coffee is sure to pull at taste buds universally, and certainly with our Seattle listeners. She's also written Divorce Diva, Laurel London, Magical Cures, Olivia Davis, Spies and Spells, and the Kenni Lowry series, where the food is fried, the secrets are buried, and Kenni Lowry is sheriff. I encourage you all to visit her fun website, tonyakappes.com, Tonyakappes.com. Y'all, please help me welcome Tonya Kappes.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here, Julie and Wendy. And Julie, I wish I could say go Bengals since I'm just about 10 minutes from the Cincinnati line, but I can't. But I can say go Kentucky Wildcats basketball.
That sounds good. That sounds absolutely right on.
Very nice. Tonya, your books are about a small town Kentucky setting with southern living, sayings, and wonderful characters. They're absolutely charming and feel so real. You're writing stories about a beautiful part of the world, as I can imagine from the vivid descriptions in your books, and as I can see from the pictures and videos on your awesome website, tonyakappes.com. When you write, what is it you do that keeps your fiction frosted with that southern taste?
Well, as for the Kenni Lowry series, actually, it is actually based in my real hometown that I grew up in, my small hometown. And so, people, if you were to step into my small hometown with the book and go down the paths and go down the streets, you'll be like, oh my goodness, I'm in the Kenni Lowry, the book. And as a
Nice.
matter of fact, yeah, I had one reader that she came to an event and she said, I could not believe it. She goes, I had to pull on the side of the road when I saw the exit for Clay's Ferry because I'm like, I've got to get a picture of me under Clay's Ferry. That's Tonya. That's in Tanya's book. But I always, I grew up Southern, and I grew up in the small town, and I grew up with the quirky neighbors. I grew up, of course, hearing all the Southern sayings, and that just spills over into all of all of my series, and especially Kenni Lowry mysteries, because I want to bring my readers along as I had actually experienced it, and as I still experience it. And for people that don't live in the South, I think when they do step into one of my novels, they do like that, genre part of it.
I just love being brought along with that. It's just wonderful. In your Kenni Lowry series, she gets some help from her grandfather ghost, and this adds a touch of the paranormal to the mystery. What attracts you about ghosts and the paranormal?
I think the aspect of when I first started writing the series, paranormal was starting to be a little bit more popular, and there wasn't a whole lot of ghosts out there. It was more witches, and I had done a witch series before, but the paranormal just adds another dimension to it. And it also can add another part of the funny. And I write with humor as well. So when I decided to make the ex-sheriff, which happens to be Kenny's grandfather, a ghost that just so happens to come back when there's a murder in the town, because I thought it'd be funny that for her first in Kentucky, the sheriff is an elected office, and it's a 4-year term. So for the first 3 years that she was elected, there was no crime. So everybody in the community was so happy. And in the book, she said she was hoping that because she was such a great sheriff. But what she finds out is that her grandfather for the past 3 years had been scaring off any would-be robbers or any would-be crime, so he could keep his granddaughter safe. It isn't until there's a murder that there's a double murder in the first book, Fixing to Die, where he shows up, and she's, couldn't believe it, but he's there because he's there in ghost form to be her ghost deputy and really keep her safe. So in all the books, when he shows up, they know that she knows that, it might not look like a murder, but if her grandfather's ghost shows up, Papa, she knows that it was a murder before she even has to really get an autopsy.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah.
So I think that what I like most about incorporating that is that it just adds another element of surprise, and you can do so many funny things with ghosts, and we don't really know. We'll talk later about my experience with ghosts, but we don't really know for sure. I don't really know for sure if there is such a thing, but spirits I believe in, and again, that's an experience I had we can talk about later. But you can do an awful lot of funny things with, things that you don't really have the research for.
Well, fans don't have long to wait for the next in the Kenni Lowry series. Axe to Grind, number 3 in the series, is out September 19th this year. I can't wait.
Thank you.
Can you give us a little preview of what's in store for our favorite small town sheriff?
Oh yeah, well, as a writer, you know that we can find the strangest things, and I thought, well, you kind of write sometimes what you know, and so I decided to have the most famous person from Cottonwood come back to town, and it is an author, and she is a world-renowned author with movies, and just a huge, known around the world, and huge movie stars, and she is coming home to retire. And so what happened is that she ends up passing away. And it was rumored that she has a manuscript that's a tell-all nonfiction. And, we always say that, Southern people keep their secrets swept under the rug. But what happens when that rug goes up for sale? Because all of her stuff gets auctioned off. And the keeper of all her stuff is her assistant, her loyal assistant, who ends up dead, and a manuscript is missing. So someone doesn't want that manuscript to come to life. And so there's a lot of secrets that are uncovered in the next book, which makes they're funny secrets. Some are not so funny, and some are enough to kill for.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Thanks.
I can't wait. Let's talk a little bit. In your Ghostly Southern Mysteries series, the heroine Emily can see dead people, and she helps betweeners who can't cross over until their murderers have been caught. And it's unusual for readers to get to know murder victims directly. In this case, we hear and see these victims right along with Emily, and we hear what they think happened and find out what they actually didn't know and what they were mistaken about. And I think it's a wonderful way to humanize the victim. What's different about writing ghost characters?
Well, this in that particular series, it is obviously, like you said, the victim, and I like to, like make all my readers care about the victim. And in a lot of the books, your victim shows up within, the first 30 pages, so you don't really get to know the victim unless it's, woven into the storyline. But I want them, the ghosts, I feel like you can get to know their character. And I think it's important because, they, in that series, like when she drives through town, Emily, my funeral home girl,
Yeah.
the ghost characters will look out and say, "Oh, I sure do miss that." Or one of the characters had her go to a local bar because he was a drunk, and so he just wanted her to order his favorite drink so he could smell it. And so he would like smell it over, her shoulders. Or one would get a craving for sweet tea, so she'd have to go see her granny to get a drink of sweet tea. And so, just writing the ghost characters, you can really, write anything that you can think up about them, because again, it's not like I had a ghost walk beside me and do these things. So I make those characters my funny characters. Right off the bat in the first book in that series, which the 7th book came out today. But the first book, one of the main ghosts said, "Well, I didn't like her in the lip," because she had her funeral, and this lady walked in and she goes, "Well, I declare, why is she here? I didn't like her in the living, much less when I'm dead." And so, and that actually happened when I was a kid at a funeral home. I had heard an old lady say, "Well, she didn't like him while he was living. Why is he here? And she ain't sure the world ain't gonna like him when she's dead," because he was there paying respects for her. But, and I thought that was just the funniest thing as a kid to hear. So, in my mind, I could just picture this person laying, in the casket, and when this person walked by, thinking, "My goodness, why is he here?" And so, so I think, oh my gosh, that could make, ghost character so funny. And so I vividly remember hearing that as a kid and seeing that. And so that kind of found its way into my writing. And you can just kind of do anything with them. You can ghost them into a scene when you need them, ghost them out of a scene when you don't need them. And, you can transition them a lot easier than someone that's physically there and have to do a whole complete transition sentence or paragraph or whatever.
Oh, that's
So
a
they're
good point.
yeah, they're much easier for me to write, because it's kind of a no holds bar, because no
Yeah.
research with really them.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, how important to the plot do you feel it is that justice is served at the end?
Well, I think that particularly with cozies, the reader really does get ingrained in the characters. And cozies are all set up and sold or bought, or however you want to say, written, mainly series. So these readers get to know these, these characters. And so when you kill one of them off, they've gotten to love this character and they want to see justice. Or when you introduce them in your books, you always want them to have that feeling of completeness at the end, and that justice was served, because you don't really pick up a mystery for it not to, my cozy readers don't pick up a mystery for it just to stay hanging. They're like, "Well, I want to see who did it and why they did it." So it's not an option in any of my books, because my publishers wouldn't let me do it anyways. But, I like it all nice and tidy with a little bow on top, to fix it up. So
I agree. I think, especially being a cozy, crazy fan myself, I do like it tied up in the end, as you're talking about.
right, right.
Does anyone in your family or among your friends ever think that they're recognizing themselves in one of your fictional characters? And what do your family and friends feel about your characters?
Well, that's interesting that you should even just ask this question because actually, no joking, hand to God, 2 weeks ago, I'm a lifetime member at Weight Watchers and I go every Monday. And although I've been lifetime for 8 years, no joke, I go every week to my meeting. And so I have a character in my Killer Coffee series named Loretta. And she calls her, and then when she says her name, it sounds like she's saying Loretta. And so Loretta is tan and she's a fancy sort of lady. And I don't live in my hometown. I live about 2 hours north of my hometown now. And there's a lady in my Weight Watchers group named Loretta, and she goes to Florida in the winter. And yeah, I wasn't thinking of her when I was writing the book. And so the other day I'm sitting there and a girl came up to me and she goes, "Oh my gosh, Tonya, is our Loretta in your book?" And I said, "What?" And about two other girls came running up. They go, "Oh, we want to hear this answer." And they said, "Is Loretta in your book?" And Loretta goes, "Am I?" And I'm like, "No." And so they honestly thought it was her, but it was not her. But, subconsciously, I don't know. But no, it was not meant for her. But I will say that every person that is on the cover of my Ghostly series is someone that I knew or someone that I know, just to give them a name. Like the first one, the Ghostly series was Ruthie. I had a neighbor. Her name was Ruthie, and we used to sit together. This has been, goodness, 20 years ago. And she lived alone and she was in her 80s. And every Sunday night we watched Murder, She Wrote together.
Oh.
And she was so much fun. This is before I got married. And she had bachelorette. I had a bachelor. This is when I was young, just got married. And I had bachelorette parties for all my girlfriends getting married. And she would come over and she'd party down with us. And she was just so fun. And so I really enjoyed her. And then in my Kenni Lowry series, when the God Bee got killed, that was named after my cousin. And it was my way of honoring him because my family reads my books. And he, since I can't live in my hometown, he really helps my parents out on their acreage, and he helps my dad out. And my dad, my mom's in her 60s and my dad's in his 70s. And it was my way of kind of paying, homage to him and thanking him for that, although he gets killed, but because I didn't want that character to drag on in the series. Yeah. But, so, some of my family members find themselves in there. Of course, I have 4 boys and all their friends are always like, "Can you put me in a book and kill me?" And I'm like, "No way." But, yeah, everybody finds a little bit of somebody in them. And like I said, the one whole series is completely after my hometown of Nicholasville. So
that's beautiful. They have, some kind of homage to these people that you care so much about. I really like that.
Well, thank you. But, as for what they think about my stories, I am so lucky from the very beginning when I said I wanted to be a writer, which was well into my late 30s, mid 30s. I've been very, very blessed with parents that said, "Go for it. You can do it." And every time I've done something different in my life, I've got 2 degrees. I've always, every time I've set my mind to it, I've done it. And I think it's because they've always said, "Sure, you can do anything you want to do." So they love it. And as a matter of fact, my mom goes on most of my book signings with me and out of town, and I love spending that time with her.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah.
Well, the love interests that are in your stories are also wonderful Southern men. What do you feel are the important qualities for a fictional romantic interest?
Well, as you know, with cozies, one of the main rules is there's a love interest, but there's no, kissing or sex. And so, which is great because I always say a sex scene for me would be my sleuth, being in an intimate relation or intimate situation with her boyfriend or husband or loved one or whatever, and she's slipping off those cute little panties, and she flicks them with her toe across the room at him. He tries to catch it, and it cuts his cornea or his eyeball somehow. They have to rush to the emergency room, and while he's getting worked on, she runs up and down the stairs looking for something to drink, and then she finds a dead body in the stairwell with the knife through her chest. So that would be my sex scene. So I knew that I don't really write them well and that no one would be interested in a romance. So I had to figure out something other than just the pretty eyes, the nice smile. And, Southern men are very hard to find, and they're very, very hard to say no to. So when you put that Southern charm or that Southern drawl in there and their slow ways, it just adds an element of charm. And I think that that's important to me and my readers when I'm writing, because I am just Southern mysteries, really. So when I write, they're expecting that Southern romance from the men. And although my women are strong and they still like their doors opened, they still like to, be catered to on a date and stuff. So, but when it comes to working and figuring out the crimes, they like to be, obviously my women sleuths like to be, top dog. But at the end of the day, they still like a good Southern gentleman. So I think it's very important for them to, hold true to those good manners that we've always heard about or that they've always had, and pulling out the chairs, the thank yous, the yes ma'ams. I think all that's important.
Very nice. Well, as a contemporary cozy mystery writer, can you comment on how this subgenre has evolved and where you see it headed?
Well, I think that with anything, what I think has evolved the most is using technology. And what I'm getting feedback on from my publishers or my editors and my publishing houses is, you really need her to be using more of those handy gadgets, like the iPhone. I think that we're not going to see none of that go away, obviously. Yeah. And so incorporating more of that, but not to where you're doing it so much. Like I know somebody that had done MySpace once, and you saw where that went. Yeah. So it's dated her book. So you've got to do it to where it's not really dating your book. So a lot of times I'll say she pulled out her phone. Like today I wrote a scene where she pulled out a phone and took a picture of a file. So she would have it, and then she put the file back. Before we used to have to steal the files, which sometimes they still do. But, before, we had to, like I said, steal the files and not take a picture of it unless you had a big clunky camera or one of those little spy cameras, which generally didn't turn out good. And so the technology part is what's made it more contemporary. But as for the sleuthing and or not the sleuthing, but the murders, there's only so many ways you can kill somebody. There's only so many ways you can find a dead body. So those of all, I think, will stay the same, and it'll just be those small little twists that she can use to, to solve the crime. And, like updating the libraries, because we use a lot of libraries, or I do. So, I have a librarian that's like freaked out because she thinks she's going to lose her job because everything's going to ebooks. And, so I'm kind of starting to put those little things in there. And so I think we're going to see a lot more technology. There might be even, I rumored, like a steampunk cozy mystery kind of thing, which I find very interesting because I don't read steampunk and I don't write steampunk, obviously. So I think you're going to see a lot more of that kind of gadgety thing, come, not that it's ever been written in cozies, but remember Get Smart, how he used a phone, his shoe phone, and all those kind of things. I think you're going to see a lot more of those kind of things come to play, and maybe less ghost or witchy kind of. I think witches have kind of fallen to the wayside a little bit. And then, like I said, I just do light paranormal. So if I had to get rid of a character, I could. But I just think that right now, there's so much out there and so many different ideas that, especially in self-publishing, and a cozy author can do whatever they want. And so, but as for the traditional cozy, I think they're going to be a little bit more technology based. So,
Interesting. That's
yeah.
very insightful, I think.
Thank you.
But Tonya, I would love to ask you if would you mind doing a reading from one of your books for our listeners?
Oh, sure, sure. What about if I do it from the first Kenni Lowry book called Fixin' to Die?
That sounds great. Yes,
Okay,
please.
and I cannot read it as great as my narrator, but I'll try to. I'll try to do it. Calling all units. Betty Murphy's voice felt like a stiletto in my ear as it came from the police walkie-talkie. The clock read 7 in the morning. Betty couldn't have been at the sheriff's office long enough to already be calling all units. Not a good sign for a Monday morning, especially since I hadn't enjoyed my cup of coffee yet. Damn, I groaned, putting the cup of coffee in the beanbag holder that laid over the hump on the floorboard. It was too early for anyone in Cottonwood, Kentucky to be out and about, much less needing assistance from the sheriff's department. Well, unless it was about the multiple coyote sightings that had been reported throughout the county, which weren't unusual for this time of year. In that case, I had my 12 gauge nestled in the back seat, ready to scare them away. Duke lunged his front paws from the passenger side to the floorboard, licking up what little coffee had spilled. There was no way he was getting all his 90-pound body squeezed down on that floorboard. Kenny, you there? Betty asked again before I could unvelcro the walkie-talkie from my shoulder. Calling all units. I wasn't sure why she was calling for all units when the only unit was me. And Betty was well aware of that fact. Holding the steering wheel steady with one hand, I reached up and grabbed the police radio. Betty, I'm here. I twisted the windshield wipers on to get what was hopefully the last of the lingering rain we'd had over the past few days. What do you have for me? Oh, God, Kenny. She sounded out of breath, rushing over my nickname short for Kendrick. I mean, Sheriff Lowry, I barely got in the door and put my pocketbook down before the phone started ringing. She didn't skip a beat. Ronald Walton is dead, and you better get over there before the rest of the town hears about it and beats you there. I jerked forward when I brought the old wagoneer to an abrupt stop. I scooted up on the edge of my seat and looked out the windshield and over the hood to make sure the engine wasn't lying on the pavement. What? Shock came over me. I stared at the window. Betty had to be mistaken. Dr. Walton had birthed over 95% of the population in Cottonwood, including me. He was old, but not casket shopping old, and his death would be a blow to the community. D-E-A, dead! She spit out each letter for me as if I didn't know how to spell. She sucked in a deep breath. Where are you? She asked through her sobs. I'm out on Bone Road going toward the festival grounds to make sure they haven't flooded. I swung the Jeep around and headed back to town. The unseasonable amount of rain had calmed to a slow drizzle. I'm on my way, my voice cracked with weariness. I had just seen Doc Walton a couple of weeks ago for my annual physical, and he looked healthy to me. Gosh, I hope he didn't have a heart attack, I said. What do you mean heart attack? Betty talked so fast her false teeth clicked. He is knife sticking out of his neck dead. Far from a heart attack, her voice choked. I'm talking murder. I couldn't bring the words to form on my lips. I tried again. Murder? Murder? I whispered in disbelief. Betty, you need to call the state reserves. We're going to need some help. There hadn't have been a murder or any crime for that matter on my watch since I'd been elected sheriff 2 years for my 4-year term. The state reserve officers were available to small towns to help out with crime scenes like this, especially when the town only required one sheriff and one deputy. I pushed the gas pedal down, picking up a lot more speed, the scenery passing by as particularly dreary as it had become. Just over 2 years ago, I had found my papa dead of a heart attack while I was home to visit, and this looked just like that day. Toots Buford found him this morning when she got to work and immediately called 911, Betty said, referring to Doc's receptionist. Call her back and tell her I'm on my way, I said, dreading my gut. I also need you to call Wyatt Granger. He's probably home, so wake him up and tell him to get over to Doc's house because it looks like I'm going to need some help. Got it, Betty clicked off, and I put the walkie-talkie next to my seat. Air. I needed air. I cranked the handle to roll down the window. Stop! I pushed Duke, who would do anything to get his nose prints on my driver's side window. I pushed him back over to his side of the Jeep. Not a good day to have brought him to work with me. Then I heard a voice. Stay calm.
Oh, very good.
Excellent.
Very good.
Excellent.
Oh, thank you. I'm not as good as my narrator, but I tried.
I'm hooked.
Lots of fun.
Thank you.
Well, I have some questions for you now, Tonya.
Sure.
I'm wondering, since you're kind of an expert in this subject, what do you think it is about the dynamics of small towns that seem to fascinate almost all mystery readers?
Well, just like with me personally, I am big into relationships, and I'm big in a relationship with my readers. And so I think that is something that people like, and especially in small towns, you have the nosiest neighbors, and people are going to gossip about you, but in a time of need, they're right there. And really, there's some good downhearted people, and I think that readers, when they read cozies, they're expecting that small town warm feel that they're going to be able to escape into that when they pick up that book. And particularly, like I said, with cozies, because they're going to visit these towns time and time again with these series, and so they get to know the people in the town. They get to know the town, and every time a book is released, they always say it feels like I'm coming home to visit Cottonwood, or I'm coming home to visit Sleepy Hollow or Whispering Falls, and they get so invested into these small towns that they are just they get refreshing, and they can escape back into that warm fuzzy that they get. Because right there you felt like you knew Doc Walton, and you felt bad because he'd been dead, and you get a sense of how he was loved in the community. And though that's the only part that you get to meet him, you don't get to meet him in his living form. Readers still connected with him because they're like, oh, I had an old country doctor, or I've seen that on maybe the Andy Griffith Show, or on Murder, She Wrote, or something like that. And that's a comfort, I think.
Right.
So.
Right. Okay. Well, I know Wendy touched on, are any of your characters modeled on real people, or do real people and readers think that you've written them into your book? So I'm not gonna revisit that. But you said something earlier that kind of piqued my curiosity.
Sure.
You said something about your own personal experience with spirits, and would you care to tell us more about that?
Sure. As a matter of fact, I was on, Ghost Adventures. How that show is like, I think it's on A&E or History or something like that. But they have a talk show. They have a talk show, and I was a guest on there one time because, they picked up, they think it's fun when mystery authors write about ghosts and this, that, and the other. But actually, when I first moved up here was in 96, and I had bought a house that was in the historic district, and it was a registry. And anytime you buy a house like that, and you want to make some changes, you have to go through this process and have it approved. Sure. And so I had an old screened-in porch on the back of this house that was on these little stilts that needed to be redone. I knew that they needed to be redone because it came through on the report when I bought the house, but I loved this old house. And I knew that if I put a window, if I screened in this, if I, not screened it in, but if I, put in walls and put in a beautiful window, I could look out over this wooded area that was behind my home. And I did that. And it was about that time that I started hearing, some moaning and groaning. And I was young, and I lived amongst older people. Like I said, Ruthie was my neighbor, and she was well into her 80s, and no one young lived in this area at the time. And, of course, as time has gone over, it's turned over. But, and I became friends with all these older people. And they had, again, screened in back porches on most of these houses, and they would have their TVs up so loud that you could hear they were competing with each other because they couldn't hear the TV, and then they'd hear the neighbor's TV, so they'd turn it up.
Oh.
So I thought maybe somebody had left the TV on. So I went outside and I looked over at the Tibbses, and I thought, well, they didn't have their TV on. And I looked over at the Gilberts, and they didn't have their TV on. So I went back in my house, and I went back to bed. And so for the next few nights, I still heard this moaning and groaning. And I had 2 dogs at the time, and they started. One was a husky and one was a schnauzer, and they would be sitting there while I was watching TV, and their heads would dart in the same direction, like if somebody was throwing a ball or something. And there was nothing.
Oh.
I'm like, are they looking at a gnat? Are they looking at something? So then my neighbor Ruthie, she said, he always said she was here. And I said, well, I don't know what you're talking about. So she said, he always said she was here. And this house was over 120 years old, and I was the 3rd owner of this house.
Oh,
so the man that I had bought it from, literally, they had to take him out kicking and screaming, and he was in his 90s. And so when he was a little boy, there was a trolley that ran in front of it, and the trolley tracks are still there. And he would take that trolley when he was a kid, and he'd say, I'm going to own that house one day. And so he did, and he had his family there. And then I came along when he needed to be put in a nursing home. And so the moaning continued, and I thought that was so strange. And things started disappearing, like big things, like a camera, like a real, like Nokia camera, and strange things like my iron from my ironing board. And I went out and I would buy these things, and as soon as I would buy them, I'd get home, and the old one would show up in my kitchen cabinets where my plates were that I used every day.
Wow.
Oh. And it was the strangest thing. So then I had a son, my first son, and a baby, and strange things started happening, and we had gotten new windows put in, and one of the brand new windows, because we wanted the baby to have good windows, and it was an old house. So in his window, when I was cleaning, it had said M was sketched into it, and I thought, oh my gosh, the people that lived here were the Myerses. So I'm like, is this Mrs. Myers? Because I'm thinking he said she was still here, and so I started talking to this thing, and so my dog, my husky, was really protective of my son at night in his crib, and he would sleep under his crib. And in these old houses, you can hear everything. And my son's bedroom was on the 2nd floor, and I would be watching TV downstairs, and we'd hear his binkies drop. So I would go back up to his room to pick up his binkies and put them back in his crib, his little pacifiers. And the dog, all the binkies would be in the crib, and the dog would be standing there looking at him in the crib. And I'm thinking, my dog put those up. So I had a priest come on 3 occasions to bless the home. To all 3 occasions, he got sick and could not come. And then I put the house up for sale because we were going to buy a bigger house that came up for sale, to grow. And these houses sell like hotcakes. I mean, you can hear word of mouth, and people, you don't have to put your house up on the market. So I ended up putting it up on the market, and it was not selling. And we just couldn't understand why. We had done all the proper channels to keep it restored in its beautiful condition. And I went to a psychic. And I said, listen, something's going on in this house. And she said, oh, yeah, Martha lives there. And I'm like, who? And she said, Martha. And she goes, oh, she doesn't want you to move. And I said, huh? She goes, oh, she loves your son. She said, at first she really didn't like you guys because you tore down her screened-in porch. Like, the psychic knew all this stuff. Wow. And I said, huh? And she said, yeah, she was mentally handicapped, and she sat in a wheelchair all day long, and that's where she would sit outside and listen to the birds and look at the trees, the wooded area. And she got mad that y'all did that, but then you had your son, and she really started taking to him, and she doesn't want you to move. And I said, well, what do I got to do? And she said, well, you either have to take her with you, or you have to find out where she's buried, and you've got to take her back. So there's two cemeteries that was close there. One is a Catholic cemetery and one's a public cemetery. Non-denominational, I guess you can call it that. I don't know. But anyways, and so I knew that they were Catholic, and I'm not Catholic, but I knew that they were. So I found through some research where she was buried. And I put that baby in his pumpkin seat to go to the car. And I know my neighbors, because my neighbor said, Tonya, are you okay? Because I walked outside and I go, come on, Martha, we're taking you back. And so I just talked it out. I opened up. I drove a Toyota Camry at the time, and I opened up the door and I said, come on in, Martha, I'm taking you back. And because it wasn't an option for her to go with me. And this had been 3 months into selling my house. And I got home, and I took Martha to the cemetery, and I said, now, Martha, this is it. You're going to be laid to rest now. We've enjoyed you for the past few years, but we've got to move on. And I said, I've got to sell my house. And so that night, my realtor called, and she goes, I got somebody that might be interested in your house. And within 20 minutes of them looking at it, we had it sold.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my goodness.
And so I said, well, I don't know, I never saw her, but I did hear moaning, and so much so that my sister would come stay with me, and she would hear it, and she stopped coming to stay with me. She would stay somewhere else. And not only that, Martha did strange things, like she would turn on all the water faucets at 3 a.m. And I'm talking outside water spigots, the basement where my laundry room was. She'd turn on all that water, the bathrooms. She'd even would turn on and if she didn't turn on the faucets, she'd turn on radios and the toys, and so it was something. And I got to talking to that priest, and we talked about it. He said, "Oh, I believe there are spirits." And so I don't necessarily know if it was a ghost, but I do know that it was a spirit, or it was something that was not happy with me at first. So
wow,
that is my one and only, and the only one I ever want, ghost story.
Oh, that was terrific. And that gives us a lot more insight into the development of some of your ghostly characters. Definitely.
Right.
Okay.
So I was writing that series, I thought, that is so unbelievable. If I didn't have witnesses, people would not have believed me.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh.
Okay, I have a quick question for you.
Sure.
Please finish this sentence for us. If I wasn't a mystery writer, I'd be a what?
I'd still be a child therapist.
Oh.
I had a whole nother life. This whole writing gig, it was a hobby that I only wanted to write one book. Now I'm on my 45th book. So it was just a hobby for one book, and that turned into, as you guys know, you just can't write. You didn't realize you got more than one book in you. And my family at this time, you had 4 boys. I had 4 little boys, and my husband was always encouraging. He's like, sure, I bet because he's the one who said you can write a book, after he realized I was spending a lot of money on books, reading them. And so it was about 2 people within a 2-hour period that said, oh my gosh, you should write a book, because I was telling stories, of course. And so the next day, I was at 2 of my boys played Pee Wee football, and you couldn't leave in case they got hurt because they were so small. And I started my first book underneath the oak tree overlooking the Ohio River into Cincinnati during their Pee Wee football practice. And my first degree from the University of Kentucky is education, elementary ed, and then I went up to Northern once I moved up here, and I do love school. I had gone back and I became a child therapist, and I had my own gig going on up here, and I loved it. And this book writing thing was a way to help me escape kind of what was going on with that. And it was up until about 3 years ago that I actually stopped my practicing. But I always keep up that certification in case this book gig goes south. So
I see. I see.
I love
Not
that
likely,
job.
though.
Yeah, and I did love that job. So I would go back doing that in a heartbeat. So,
Okay,
yep.
great. Okay, another question from you, since you're obviously from the Southeast. Have
Sure.
you ever attended or participated in Killer Nashville?
I have. Um, and as a matter of fact, it was one of the most exciting things happened to me there. Um, I had gone, I know Clay, and I had gone to do a marketing workshop because back in the day, I was kind of notorious for doing things out of the box. And so mystery or writers say, oh my gosh, teach me how to do that. So I had actually done workshops for a few years going around, and I had even written a book about it. And so Clay had asked me to come to speak, and Julie, I don't know if I saw you there or not. I might have seen you there. Did you
No,
go?
I haven't been there yet,
Oh,
but
you have. Okay.
one of these days, one of these
Well, there
years.
you go.
Yeah.
So Ann Perry was there, and
Oh, yes.
so she come up to me and she bought a book of mine. I'll never forget it. And she said to me, "You're going places." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, did Aunt Perry just say that?"
That's
And
awesome.
so that was my most memorable experience. But I did go, but now I don't do a whole lot of writer conferences. I do a lot of reader conferences
Okay.
because. Like I'm going to BoucherCon, the big dog. I'm in Toronto, and the only reason why I'm going to that one this year is because every year I put on my own reader event. I rent a mystery train somewhere different around the United States. And how that came about is people would say, "Oh, when are you going to come here? When are you going to come here?" And I can't go one place for one person. Again, just this year, my last child has graduated, so in 3 weeks, I'm going to be an empty nester, which is terrible to say, but we're so excited. But anyway,
Oh, I bet. I bet.
but it's
Sure.
terrible to say how excited we are. But after 4 boys, and now they're all four are going to be in college, though. So, but
Oh, my
but
goodness.
anyway, so what happened was when you have small kids, my family is important to me, so I don't just pick up and go wherever. So, I was very picky of what conferences I chose. So what I started doing is I said, you know what, I'm going to host a mystery event somewhere, and I'm going to do one every year somewhere different. So what I had done was I said, oh, how fun would it be to do a train ride with dinner and a mystery theater? So I found one, and every year I find one, and I have it always the first weekend in October, and they sell out within a couple hours. So then the next years I started inviting other authors because it's kind of hard when you've got 100, and when the train will hold like 100 to 150 people, it's kind of hard being the only one there, trying to give everybody your attention.
Sure.
And it's kind of turned into a weekend. So what happens is that on Friday we get there. Friday night we have a pizza party at the hotel. I get a whole block of rooms. The readers come in. On Saturday is either a train lunch or a train dinner, and then we go back to the hotel and just have a nice relaxing visit. On Sunday morning we all get up and have a breakfast at the hotel, and then we all depart. So it's become a fun thing. And so my good friend Duffy Brown, I don't know if you know who Duffy is, but she lives local by me, and she's a good friend of mine. And so now she has started doing them with me every year. So we kind of call it the Two Dames on a Mystery Train event. And so we
Right.
invite different readers. So we have our one in Lockport, New York, which is right over from Toronto. And I said, we need to make this a week. We need to do our mystery weekend and then sit up there and write for a week and go to BoucherCon since it's up there. So mostly I try to focus on doing reader events where I can talk to my readers, and I mostly focus on the event that I've been putting on. So I don't really do a whole lot. And I mean, I would go back to Killer Nashville because it is, you do learn a lot. You learn a lot of procedural things, medical procedural things, and plus
Right.
Nashville's just a great place to go anyways. I was just there 2 weeks ago for a keynote speaking event for readers. So that was a lot of fun.
Sounds terrific. And that mystery train event sounds wonderful.
Oh, thank
If
you.
listeners are interested in that, could they find out more on your website about that?
They can. Currently, we have a wait list for this year, but they can always get on that. But it's under the events. It says Mystery Train event or weekend. And then each year during the Mystery Train event, we announce where the next year is going to be. And so, but yeah, they can always look on the website or follow me on any kind of social media. You'll find it somewhere, or Google it.
Great. Well, one last question for you here. What's the best lesson from your personal writing life that you would like to share with our listeners?
Wow. Well, that would be two things. One would be for readers and one would be for writers. And my thing that I have found out the most with my readers is that I think they know I truly care about them. I think they know that, whenever they meet me in person, I'm the same person on social media that I am in person. And I think that kind of takes them back a little bit because they always say, gosh, I thought this one author was going to be a certain way. And when I met her in person, she was totally the opposite from her social media. She's like, it's so refreshing to see that you really are funny and that you really are like not, like a talkative person. And
genuine, yes.
Yeah, and I let that spill over, and I want to meet my readers. I don't call them fans. I don't believe in that word. They're my readers. I'm a reader just like them, and I'm just trying to tell a story to make them forget their day. They might have had a good day, they might have had a bad day. So I'm just trying to give them a world they can escape into. So that's part of my personal life that I try to exude. Now, when one of my kids get mad at me, they'll say, I should put that on Facebook so they know what you're really like. And I say, yeah, I'm only like that with you because I'm disciplining you. But, I think that, for readers, I think that, I really don't have any lessons except that, I really am the person that they see, and I really care about them, and I love I keep every single reader email, every single letter. Every month I have a birthday list that about 16,000 people, and every month I send out birthday cards to every single person in that month that's on my list, and I handwrite those out. And I want to make sure that they not care about them, and that somebody cares about them. I think that's important. Like you said earlier in your opening, in today's world, I think it's important that people know that we care about each other. And so I started that years ago, and I've still continued it. But as for writing, lesson for writers, like today I put that book out, but did I celebrate a release? People say, yeah, you should always celebrate, but I didn't. I had to cook dinner. I had to cook supper. All my kids are home. I had to go get blood taken for my annual physical. And I have two book deadlines, one for Crooked Lane and one for Henry Press. And so I came home and I worked, and right before I got on with you guys, I was cleaning up the supper dishes. So my best advice for writers is to keep writing. Let that book, when you put out a book, you let that book go. I don't read reviews. I never have. So, when we do, like when their reviews are quoted on like a social media, like an author page or something, I'm so grateful for them. I'm grateful for bad reviews, but for writers, I don't sit there and read reviews on the first day of sales. I don't look at the ranking on the first day of sales. I just keep writing, and you keep writing that next book, and you keep writing that next book, and I write every day. So that would be my best personal writing. But I also make sure that you get up and move because I make sure that I get up. Every hour I set my alarm, and I get up for 10 minutes, and I walk either around my outside, like right now I have a pool, so I like walking outside and working outside. So I'll walk around that for 10 minutes and usually can get in 1,000 steps. And so make sure that you get up and you move around, drink plenty of water, and keep writing. Don't stop. Don't sit there and boo-hoo over whatever, reviews are, or, just keep on going. So that's about it. Not nothing and enlightening, I'm sure, but that's what gets me through.
That's beautiful.
But but use,
Thank you.
useful advice, certainly. Very useful.
Well, thank
Well,
you.
Tonya, we'd like to thank you so much for joining us and giving us a taste of Southern mystery and certainly the hospitality of your voice and your time and your energy. And we look forward to Axe to Grind, which will be number 3 in the Kenni Lowry series, and that's appearing on September 19th.
Yes, and thank you, ladies, for having me. I was so excited when Wendy called and or emailed me and said, Julie and I would like to have you on. And of course, I jump at the chance to be able to talk to anybody about books in any genre, but especially cozy mysteries. So you guys have a great podcast here, and I love that you guys do this, and y'all are entertaining, and plus you're awesome writers. And so I thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you.
Oh, it's our complete pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good night.
Good night.
Take care.
But listeners, hang on because I think Julie's got a segment that's very interesting. Right, Julie?
I do, and I'm going to talk about the things that sustain us. Along with the search for justice, which Wendy referred to early on in our podcast segment, and the need for a sense of belonging, I wanted to think about some of the things that sustain us in good times and bad. And certainly for me, writing is near the top of that list. I'd also add family, friends. I mean, what would I do without friends and colleagues like Wendy? Having access to nature, exercise, and of course, reading. I've got my summer reading list jam-packed with mysteries, thrillers, historical fiction, and some great nonfiction, including a wonderful new book by Sheryl Sandberg and Adam Grant called Option B, Facing Adversity, Building Resilience, and Finding Joy. Some wise words for all of us, especially when we are facing adversity. Now that we're in the midst of summer, at least in most parts of the United States, I hope our listeners are enjoying some lovely weather and the best writing as enthusiastic readers. And the best writing, the way I define it, lights up your brain and touches your heart. Over to you, Wendy.
Thanks, Julie. Well, I'm going to talk about reading effective dialogue. It's a skillful writer who can put on paper realistic dialogue. And a writer like Tonya has an added talent in reflecting the dialect of the South in her stories as a reminder of the setting, but not as a distraction or a difficulty for readers who are not from the South. It's important that people's conversations sound realistic to the reader's ear and also need to move the plot along. Especially in small town mysteries, I'm always eager to learn from the gossip and the banter from the population, and I don't want to hear it secondhand through the narrator. I want to be part of the conversations as they happen. But one of the things that can make dialogue tiresome for a reader is constant he said and she said and similar dialogue tags. I was so impressed with how Tonya uses motion by her characters to toss the dialogue back and forth, effectively and subtly letting the reader always know who's speaking. For example, I'm going to give you a brief insight into a wonderful exchange between Emma Lee and her love interest, Jack Henry, in A Ghostly Murder. We better go. I put my fingers up to his lips before we really are late. He released me and let out a deep sigh. Woo-wee, you drive me crazy, Emily Raines. He ran a finger down the side of my face before he put the car in gear and peeled out. I had to take several deep breaths to get my breathing back to normal. I did want to tell you that B. Allen Burns called me today. He gripped the wheel to make the turn into his parents' driveway. She said the platter mysteriously appeared in the cabinet of the funeral home, clean and everything. I moaned. I'm guessing you're going to deny knowing anything about that? He put the car in park. Bolt and Rocky, the family's two big Labrador retrievers, bounded toward the car at full speed. Not a thing. I stepped out of the car. And so on. And I have to apologize that I don't have the southern accent to really show this dialogue off. But you can see the clever way that you're well aware of who's speaking based on the action around the words. And just wait until you read this book and find out more. The action is the plot, the characters are the story, and it's the characters who tell the story. And for my book recommendation, I'm recommending a work by another author who, like Tonya, skillfully and beautifully captures the culture and scene of a specific southern city. In this case, it's New Orleans in Out of the Easy by Ruta Sepetys. I'm pairing this book with a southern Moscow mule drink. I got the recipe on Tonya's website, and a po' boy overstuffed sandwich. Now, let me ask, can you have family outside of your blood family? Do you drive your own destiny? This book, Out of the Easy, answers these questions as the character Josie turns 18 years old in the French Quarter of New Orleans in 1950. Her mother is a prostitute and completely irresponsible. Her father is unknown. How did Josie find her way growing up in the Big Easy? And will she find her way out of the Big Easy and into Smith College, which is her greatest aspiration, despite the life she was born into? Can she design her destiny? This is a story of family, identity, and overcoming one's circumstances. Josie's mother, Louise, is about as despicable as you can imagine. There's great empathy for a 14-year-old Josie who declared her hatred for her mother. Then one of her closest friends, Charlie, says, "Don't hate her, Joe. Feel sorry for her. She's not near as smart as you. She wasn't born with your compass, so she wanders around bumping into all sorts of walls, and that's sad." You'll embrace and cheer for Josie, who's a strong, smart, independent, and self-motivated character. As the author said in an interview about the character, "I think I write what I wish I could become, characters I admire with qualities I wish I had." Josie's surrounded by an amazing cast of characters, each with a side story of his or her own, and each impact Josie's life in different ways. The author said in an interview, the city of New Orleans was really conducive to creating this eccentric, rich cast of characters because the city itself is beautiful and tragic and complex at the same time. And so the people that I interviewed, they were so full of color and flair. Josie works in a bookstore and loves to read. The central question of this novel surfaces with a customer who buys Dickens and Keats from Josie. Their discussion about David Copperfield concerns the quote, "Decisions, they shape our destiny. Whether I shall turn out to be the hero of my own life or whether that station will be held by anybody else, these pages must show." Josie and the kind customer wonder, can you be the author of your own destiny? Adding to the intrigue of the quarter, the kind customer is found murdered the next day, and now this mystery has to be solved. And what was the inspirational quote in the other book? "I love you the more in that I believe you have liked me for my own sake and for nothing else," which is Keats. This author tells a gripping story about characters you will care about. The ways that the characters reach out to help each other will touch you. How's the murder resolved? What other crimes are committed? And in the end, will Josie or anyone else make it out of the easy? It's an exciting read to find out.
Thanks, Wendy. That sounds like a terrific book. Well, I'm recommending a historical mystery this time called A Death Along the River Fleet by Susanna Calkins. It's an atmospheric page-turner. This one is set in 17th century London, right after the Great Fire of 1666, a time of chaos. It's part of her series featuring young Lucy Campion, a lady's maid turned printer's apprentice and bookseller, both of the latter being highly unlikely trades for a woman at that time. And Lucy, unlike many women of the time, is literate and loves books. The mystery revolves around Lucy's discovery of a frightening specter, a young woman wandering out of the mist on Holborn Bridge, wearing only a blood-spattered nightgown. She has no memory of who she is, what happened to her, or how she came to be on the bridge. As Lucy helps the woman recover, it becomes clear that the unknown woman's safety is at risk. Lucy investigates and discovers links to the nobility and implications about how the mentally ill were treated in that day. Specifically, Bedlam, originally called Bethlehem Hospital, was where the mentally ill or disturbed people were warehoused in 17th century London, and their treatment was just as terrible as she describes it in the book, according to historical documents I've read. Lucy is a resourceful and winning personality for a protagonist. The author deals with the place of women in that society in an insightful way. You'll enjoy getting to know Lucy as a character, and if you've ever visited London, many of the places Susanna Calkins describes in the book are still there. The author's been nominated numerous times for the Bruce Alexander Historical Mystery Award and for an Agatha Award, Best Historical Novel, as well as the Mary Higgins Clark Award. For my pairing, I think I'll go with a cool, crisp Mer Soleil Chardonnay and a small slice of Stilton cheese. Why not? Well, that's a wrap for this segment. We'll be back again soon, and in the meantime, Wendy and I wish you a happy summer of reading. Take care.